Hello again and welcome to Backyard Farmer. Thanks for joining us for another hour of answering your gardening questions. You can submit those questions by dialing 402-472-1212 if you live in Lincoln. Toll-free number is 800-676-5446. We also really like getting your emails and pictures. Send them to our email address, which is byf@unl.edu. Attach those pictures. We answer them on a future show. Give us as much information as you can, including at least the county where you live. We won't stalk. Don't forget to follow Backyard Farmer during the week on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Pinterest. To start our program, we're going to take a look at samples. Debut appearance, Wayne Onosaur, all the way down from Madison County. And what do you have?
I have Columbine leaf miner tonight, and right now they're still in their mines, which is nice for us to show you. They're really small, not much you can do about them. If you do see them, you can do what I did and pick most of them off and bring them to a television show to show them off to viewers who are interested. Otherwise, you can just throw them in the trash can just to get them removed if they're bugging you. Otherwise, you can just enjoy all parts of nature's wondrous design. And I did challenge the camera crew to try and get to the little white specks at the fat end of these mines. I don't know if our viewers can see it very well. Looks like you can just barely make it out right there on the tip. You can see it's still in there. At this point, they're oval, and I would expect that they're pupating and they're getting ready to emerge as adult flies.
And they just, once you got them, right? And that's just the end of it?
Just the end of it, and then from there, if you really want to try and get rid of them, as soon as you start seeing the mines, pull the leaves, and then that way you can get rid of them that way. There's nothing you're going to be able to spray on there to get to the inside of those leaves to take care of them.
Perfect. All right, thanks, Wayne. Little bigger than last month's sample, Cole.
Yeah, I didn't want to disappoint you again, Kim. I have 3 plugs of turf from my very own lawn tonight. They're all tall fescue with a little bit of Kentucky bluegrass in there. The first sample here is healthy. Leaves are fully expanded. It's dark green. This is what healthy turf should look like. The sample in the middle here is still green and maybe bluish or purple under the right light. But what we really want to notice here is the leaves are rolling or folding into themselves depending on the species, and they kind of look much thinner. And that's the plant trying to conserve water. So this is drought stress, and this is an early sign of drought stress. And when you see this, please feel free to wait until tomorrow morning to water. We don't need to water tonight and increase leaf moisture for disease severity. So this is an early sign of drought stress. And then the last sample on the left here is a little lean, needs a little bit of nitrogen. There's also maybe some minor pathogens active on the leaves, but the point is that water is not going to fix this problem on the left. Fertilizer will. Water will fix the middle sample and make it look more like the sample on the right.
So perfect. So actually know what you've got before you try to figure out what to do about it.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks, Cole. All right, Amy, we actually had a viewer send us a picture, but and they're a Lincoln viewer, and we just happen to have a sample.
We happen to have a sample tonight. So this is serviceberry, and we have cedar quince or cedar hawthorn rust on it, very similar to cedar apple rust. It's giving us those bright yellow spots with the orange center on the inside, and on the serviceberry, it will come right over to the fruit, and we'll get the mummy fruit associated with it. So what this is going to do now is in the next month, this is going to sporulate and go back to the cedar trees, and then the cycle will repeat again next spring. Why are we seeing so much of it? It's because we have had a long, drawn out, cool spring. Lots of rain, lots of cool temperatures, and so the trees just keep getting reinfected because the spores are still coming off of those cedar trees. How do we prevent it from next year? You're going to do a fungicide application right as the leaves are emerging, or as we're starting to see those orange gelatinous structures on the cedar tree starting to sporulate, and then you should be good. If you're looking at redoing your landscape, there's a lot of resistant varieties of serviceberry, quince, hawthorn, apples, and crab apples to these, and then you don't have to worry about any fungicide applications. It may cause a little bit of premature defoliation this summer or this fall, but in general, it doesn't necessarily hurt the tree.
Awesome, and I'm glad you mentioned differences in cultivars because the cultivar gets it and the straight species doesn't so far. All right,
Cross your
Jeff,
fingers.
beauty.
Well, I brought in a couple different things tonight. The tall one here is Arrowwood viburnum. And this particular one actually grew from a seedling. And so it's taken a few years, but this year in particular, it's really put on quite a bit of growth and it's really flowering pretty nice. It's been going on for quite some time. So I know a lot of our early viburnums have already bloomed on their thing. This is kind of nice. Things are done, and now this one has kicked in. So this is kind of fun. And then later on, it'll put on some dark blueberries, birds like those, and I'll probably end up with more Arrowwood viburnum around the yard. And then off to the side here, we have just this little meadow rue. It's the last flower on the plant, so hopefully when my wife comes home, she won't miss it. But and so that's kind of a fun plant. I really like the foliage of meadow rue. It has kind of those little round leaves. It's growing in the shade of a silver maple. And so it does pretty well, but it's just a little unusual and it's kind of fun to have.
It looks a little bit like Columbine foliage.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, very nice. Well, thanks, Jeff. All right, we're going to start right off with pictures. Wayne, this is actually a picture that came to us on a question through Facebook. And they're Fort Calhoun, had to take down a big Kentucky coffee tree, broke off 10 feet above the ground. And in it, there were these. And they want to know what it is and whether they should be concerned about other Kentucky coffee tree in the area.
Well, what I can tell from these is they have that C-shaped grub look like you might see in your lawn. However, they're much larger. From there, that tells me it's probably a scarab beetle of some kind. And most of our scarabs that get into wood here are going to be burrowing in rotting wood. So they were a symptom of another problem going on. It might be why they had that tree break off at 10 feet above ground. There was some kind of rot going on, and they were in there feeding on that rotting wood. If we had to guess at a genus, we would go with Osmoderma. That's one of the more common ones in our area that would get to that kind of size.
So unless it's a rotten coffee tree, they're probably
So all the other coffee trees, unless they have some other problem with some of Amy's little friends, then I wouldn't worry about it.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Wayne. Okay, this is fun. This is a three-piecer. This is a viewer who sent us 3 different species of weeds that showed up in a thin gravel bed barnyard, attempting to take over the entire barnyard. And he did a good description. He doesn't really like using Roundup, but they seem to put out a lot of seed. He will do what he needs to if we can tell him what they are. And this is up in Stromsburg.
Okay, so yeah, three very different plants here. Pretty fun, different lifespans. In the top left corner, we have pineapple weed, and this is a winter annual. And it's usually a pretty minor weed. If it were in a lawn, I'd tell you to make the turf a little denser and be fine. Because it is a winter annual, it's completing its life cycle and it'll die soon. So not going to worry a lot about that one. In future years, pretty much any broadleaf herbicide like 2,4-D will take care of it. I do it earlier in the spring rather than now, just kind of a waste of money at this point. And then the second sample, in the top right corner, that picture was common purslane, and that's a summer annual. So we're kind of at the convergence of lifespans at this point in the season, and that one just came up a few weeks ago, and it's young, and so that one in the top right, common purslane, as it comes back up, it's a great time to control it right now as well. Something with dicamba or triclopyr or fluroxypyr is going to be most effective. Something like 2,4-D alone is not going to do a great job, but definitely control it now while it's young. The third weed, I'm sorry to let you down, but I'm not sure what this is. I looked through a book, shook some trees, knocked on doors, and couldn't quite figure this one out. So looks like a couple things, but we'd probably have better luck if you send us another picture if it flowers later in the season.
All right, excellent. And you can actually eat that purslane if you haven't already sprayed it with something.
You could, if you're into that sort of thing.
We have one in the backyard farmer garden that was bred for it, and it's pretty tasty.
Yeah, what does it taste like? Purslane?
Sure. All right, Amy, this is rhubarb ear. This is a Plattsmouth viewer. She transplanted and divided this older, like 30-year-old rhubarb. Full sun. The garden did get heavily flooded. The leaves of the rhubarb are purpley, and she thinks it's red leaf. And does she need to rogue this guy out?
So I had to do some investigation about red leaf. I haven't seen it a lot, so I did a bit of investigation, and it definitely looks like it's red leaf. The trick with red leaf is it's a bacterial disease that affects the crown. So to help determine if it really is red leaf, you need to get in there, pull some soil away from that crown, and if it's really red leaf, that bacteria should be making that crown really soft and gooey and just gross. And if that's the case, you definitely need to rogue it out. With that bacterium that causes red leaf, it stays in the soil. So it is really suggested not to go back in with rhubarb. I would probably wait a couple years before you do that, because there's going to be inoculum, and if we have another wet year again, you're just going to run into the exact same problem all over again. If you pull everything back and the crown looks healthy, you know, sit back and wait and see what's going on. Maybe it just didn't like the overwater just because of the amount of rain. But if the crown looks good, I would just leave it for the time being. But if it's soft and gooey and gross, rip it out right away.
All right, thanks, Amy. All right, Jeff, you get the multiple tomato questions.
Okay.
We've had this one and answered it kind of without pictures.
Okay.
3 or 4 viewers from everywhere from North Platte to Lincoln to out in the Imperial area are sending us pictures of tomatoes that have these leaves. There's questions about, is it disease? Is it thrips? Is it window painting? What is it?
Well, you know, looking at these, you know, I think, you know, certainly environmental, the conditions that Amy's been talking about could be contributing to it. You know, the other thing that possibly it could be is a micronutrient issue. And so I think, you know, without getting carried away, there are some products, some of those seaweed products that you can get that kind of cover a broad base of conditions that may not hurt to try. You know, I don't think that there's any danger in it, follow the label, but I think maybe that might help kind of introduce some nutrients that we may not have, especially I think some of the questions came from folks farther west where we have some sandy soils, maybe that might be also kind of contributing to this. So anyway, that would be my suggestion.
Interesting, and not thrips, probably.
I don't think so,
thrips is,
right.
It doesn't look like something I'd see thrips do.
no.
Okay.
All righty. Well, curled leaves on a plant can be a sign of distress. Could be a number of things, but a couple of the main suspects are chemical drift or aphids. Here to help us figure out the differences are entomologists Jonathan Larson and Jody Green.
Hey Jonathan, look at these leaves. There seems to be some leaf cupping.
A lot of leaf cupping on this sample and this one over here. When we see this kind of leaf cupping damage, we always have to wonder if we're looking at herbicide damage or if we're talking about a sap-feeding insect.
What would it look like if it was herbicide damage?
If we were looking at herbicide damage, we'd want to look sort of at the whole tree first and see if we could find that the damage was localized to any specific part on the whole tree. And we would want to take a look at what has happened recently around the tree. If there was a farmer making an application around the tree recently on a windy day, or if there was perhaps somebody that had treated their lawn on a really hot day. Those are the two kinds of instances where we get herbicide drift up into the tree or onto the tree. So the wind either moves it over onto the tree, or we see the product volatilize and get up into the plant from below. So we would look and see just this leaf cupping, just these like weird gnarled leaves on the plant. And we see a lot more going on these samples than leaf cupping.
Yes, this sample has a lot of leaf curl. We see some stippling, and it's covered in this honeydew, which is pretty sticky.
Very sticky.
And
gross.
This is pretty neat. There's hundreds and thousands of these aphids here. So aphids are an insect that feed on plant sap, and so they will secrete sugary honeydew. One of the signs that you can also tell if you have aphids is if there's predators, such as ants who feed on the honeydew and lady beetles who are good predators of the aphid.
So when we see these aphids on a plant like this and we get all of this sticky stuff and sooty mold, that's not very healthy for the plant or going to make for a happy tree owner. What kind of advice would you give a person that had this tree?
Well, you could try to use a heavy jet stream of water off the hose and knock them off. They wouldn't be able to get back on there. what kind of control would you recommend?
If you have a big problem like we see with these particular aphids on this tree, sometimes the water's not going to be enough. So you may want to look towards an insecticidal soap. That's an organic option here. You could try a summer oil, not a dormant oil, because the plant is growing at this point. And both of those products would smother the aphids and take care of them for you. If you've got a really bad infestation, maybe contact an arborist to come out and offer up more synthetic chemical control. But those two products as a homeowner you could purchase and use on your own.
So the moral of the story is we can't assume what the problem is by just looking at the leaves.
That's right. You can't just look at the big picture always. Sometimes you got to get in to those leaves and take a much closer look to see what's going on.
Yeah, I'm taking a closer look.
And I hope that closer look didn't put any aphids up her nose there. But you can also look at your furniture, your lawn furniture, or other plants to see if that honeydew is doing those sparkly sorts of things. So, and yes, that was indeed in our teaching and demonstration gardens on campus. That is what we are for. All right, so picture 2, Wayne, is yours. This is a Greeley, Colorado viewer. And I think our audience, our viewers, can see that perfect little cluster of teensy-weensy green eggs. It's on a lilac. She's hoping they're good guys.
Well, one of the things I did when I first got wind of this was look up carpenter worm eggs because they're common on lilacs. And no, they're not that.
Okay.
So that's a plus. One of the things that we think it may be with consulting with some of the other entomologists, we know it's probably a large moth or butterfly type egg. And since we have some of those large center-needed moths out right now, that would probably be our guess. It'd be one of those. And just as a little side note, I have had aphids up the nose and it's not pleasant.
TMI on that one.
Hey, when you're in a soybean field that's full of soybean aphid, you can't avoid it.
No choice. So she should just kind of watch and see what those do.
Maybe keep an eye on them, watch from the hatch. If she really wants to know what they are, take some fine mesh cloth, get it wrapped around there and tie it off on both ends so they can still breathe. And then that way the eggs can hatch and she can observe what actually comes out. Then they can send another picture and maybe we'll have a better luck of telling them exactly what they are.
Perfect. All right, so bindweed, field bindweed, they thought it was pretty in the lawn for a while because you know it is. And now they know better. And so far they have not done herbicides with other terrible things. So a bindweed specific might, and if so, can they get it and use it? Will smothering work, like black plastic? And if all else fails, what is the herbicide of choice?
Okay, so yeah, this is bindweed, and certainly the white and pink flowers that show up later in the end of the year can be appealing, I suppose. I'm going to defer on the mite, the biocontrol, to my colleague to the right because he was kind of grimacing as that was being mentioned. But I'll try to cover some of the other things here. You certainly, I think, could solarize and cover and maybe get some type of control. If the best way is probably to use a herbicide in fall. And herbicides such as any typical broadleaf herbicide mixture that contains 2,4-D, dicamba, etc., are going to work well on this particular weed. Additionally, quinclorac, which is the active ingredient in Drive, which we use to kill summer annual grasses, also works really well on field bindweed if you apply it in fall. In spring, they're not going to work as well, but certainly pulling them or spot controlling this time of year will prevent them from producing flowers and further seed to make a bigger seed bank. So that can help, but the best time to get complete control is to make a herbicide application in the fall.
All right, thank you. And
The mites kind of lost steam once they found out about quinclorac. It just works so much better.
yeah, we try to do the biocontrol, but sometimes it just doesn't work.
And it takes a long time.
Yeah.
And they're small, and you have to spread them they don't spread well on their own.
Okay, good to know. All right, Amy, this is hackberries from 2 different viewers. One is, of course, the standard gall on hackberry leaves, but this one is the one of concern. And this is near Holdridge, old tree. He knows it's a tough year. He does have some of the galls on the leaves, but all of a sudden, he's starting to see all this death, serious death in the crown of the hackberry.
there's so many things that could be going on. And as you can see on this picture, we definitely have nipple gall going on. That's not going to cause a lot of issues. That's a mite, just a little unsightly. The death of the crown and the browning of the branches makes me start to wonder if we aren't looking at a large canker further up in the tree that's preventing movement of water and nutrient in the upper part of the tree or to that major branch. So definitely take a look to see if you see any sunken in areas or areas that are starting to rot. If that isn't happening, we might be looking at something that's associated with the roots. And if it's a root associated item with a tree, there's just no good way to know. There's no way we can dig up that tree and take a look and be like, oh, this is the problem. And if it's an older hackberry, it might just be coming to the end of its life. Every tree, every plant has a certain lifespan, and maybe that's where this tree is at. Now, am I saying get rid of it? No. Give it some time. It has been a tough year. Take a look at it. Do not fertilize it because that's going to actually put more stress on the tree. Keep it watered if we get into any dry periods this summer and this fall, and take a reassessment next year to see how the tree's doing. Maybe it will come out of it. If it doesn't, it's just used up all of its resources of food and energy, and it's just not going to make it, and then you'll want to consider replacing that tree. And even this fall, considering putting in a replacement tree may not hurt.
All right, thanks. And I know you've had some on campus with the root issue.
Yeah, I think she's right. I think, occasionally you do have something, and who knows if it was either the climate, the environment, or herbicide damage, perhaps, that was applied around there, periodically over the years. So,
Right.
And trees only do last a certain amount of time in Nebraska. So,
Just like people.
yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose you're right. It's
All right.
depressing, but
And you actually have a tree question.
Okay.
This is a viewer who, she describes this as a wart,
Wart.
or a ball on the tree.
it's a wart.
And she wants to know what this is, and is there something she should do about this?
There's nothing, that's another item here that we can celebrate, like so many of the other things we'll see tonight. So that's a burl. So burls are caused by typically some sort of injury to the tree. So whether it was a fungus or an insect that had caused something, maybe something mechanical had caused it. And so it's just kind of some rapid growth there of tissue. So depending on the species, it can be quite valuable. So because you don't have that typical grain, you'll have kind of random graining of the trees. So hold on to it, and hopefully someday it'll be worth a lot of money.
Bird's eye maple.
Yeah, there we go, right?
Well, we've spent the last few weeks showing you what we got planted in our garden. This week, we're going to show you the mulch. Let's take a minute to hear from Extension Educator Terry James from the Backyard Farmer Garden.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, as you can see, our master gardeners have been busy working again. They have added all different kinds of mulch to our garden. We have new mulch on our paths, wood mulch, that's going to help keep our feet from getting muddy and designate people where to go in the garden, so they're kind of staying on the paths and staying out of the landscape beds. We've also added fall leaves to the garden as our mulch. That's going to help keep moisture in our soil. It's going to help keep all those pathogens in the soil from splashing up onto the leaves, so we will have hopefully less diseases in our gardens. Sorry, all you pathologists, you may not be able to find any diseases in our garden this year. And we've also actually added walking paths through our big landscape beds. We've designated areas, we've put little stepping stones down so we know exactly where to go. We're always talking about not compacting our soil, and this is really going to help designate where we walk so we are not compacting our soil. So stop by the Backyard Farmer Garden, check out all of our different kinds of mulches, and check out our soil.
Keep those boots off the ground in your bed so you don't compact that soil. We're really fortunate to have those master gardeners to help us get that mulch and pathways laid down so we can keep off the soil. It's a lot of work if you don't have a lot of help, but it looks great, and we'll be happy to host people staying on the path. All right, so you have a couple of questions. Wayne, the first one is from Eagle. This is, how do you prevent squash vine borers?
Oh, yes. We had a terrible time with those last year.
Yeah.
With squash vine borer, you have a couple options. If you've had enough flowers pollinated on the vining crop that you're trying to protect and you're satisfied with the crop that you're going to get, you can start using floating row covers to keep them off. That way you don't get the adults in there and laying eggs. If that is not an option and you want to get more produce out of those plants, make sure you monitor, watch for the adults flying around. You need to catch them before the hatched larvae burrow into the vine. They typically go at the nodes, and that's where they start. If you see a vine that's starting to die back from that, if you catch it early, you can get the larvae out and you might get that vine to recover if you're willing to do it in a delicate manner. Otherwise, just rogue out that part of the vine, get rid of it, open it up, kill the larvae so you know it's not going to get into anything else. If you're going to go for an insecticide option, you can use a contact like permethrin, and you're going to want to make sure you're putting that down at the nodes and do not get it on the flowers. That way you're not contacting your pollinators.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Wayne. Crabgrass.
What's that?
And the question is from Lincoln, is it too late to apply a second application of Apri for crabgrass?
Too late for a second application? No, it is not. I would wonder when the first application was applied. If typically we say around May 1, right? And so 8 weeks or so later, somewhere mid-June, we're going to apply, or later, we're going to apply that second application. So that depends on when you applied the first application, I would say, and what rate you used, if you were planning on making a split application, et cetera.
Okay, all right, thanks, Cole. All right, Amy, Yukon Gold and Kennebec potatoes stored over the winter in the cellar, but some of the centers won't cook. Is that a disease issue with potatoes?
They won't cook?
That's what they're saying. This came in from our phone panel.
I've never ran into a disease where they wouldn't cook. I have definitely ran into situations where they've been in storage and the centers are black and hollow, and that's called black heart, and that's from the potato growing too fast and wasn't able to put the sugars in there. It doesn't hurt to eat it, but not cooking, I would have no idea. So you stumped me today.
All of us, because we're all going, never heard of that one. We'll maybe look it up and see what we can figure out. All right, Jeff, you get this one, St. Edward. They have pampas grass, probably the big fake thing, in their iris, and they want to get it out of the iris bed. They've tried Grass Be Gone. I know you've used this stuff on campus where you've had to get rid of it. What do you do?
Yeah, I think that would be tough. You know, probably my thought would be pull what you can and stick with that. Kind of like Cole was saying earlier, we don't want things to go to seed and spread anymore. And then I would renovate the bed in August. I think I would just dig up what you want to, and then clear everything out and start over.
Right. Yeah.
Probably be good for the iris anyway.
Yeah, exactly. All right, thanks, Jeff. While you're doing that, we will start the lightning round. Are you ready, Jeff?
Nope.
Tough.
I'm just
Tough.
trying to
We have a
have fun.
Seward viewer who has dieback and small leaves in their ginkgo. They're wondering, is this potentially a frost or a winter hardiness issue?
It could be, and ginkgo can be funny like that sometimes. So again, you know, we were talking about root issues earlier. I mean, that would be something I'd be monitoring now for the next couple of years.
All right. A Nebraska City viewer has 1- and 2-year-old hollyhocks, wants to know when to transplant.
Well, I guess obviously we want to do it before it gets too warm. I would say sooner than later, and make sure you kind of give yourself plenty of soil around them. So take a big spade and move them that way.
Okay. A Blair viewer has 7-year-old dwarf lilacs that have only bloomed once, but they prune them in the fall.
So they're cutting the flowers off every year. So yeah, let's wait, give it a whole year here. Don't do any pruning this year, and then I bet you'll be happy next year.
Okay. Any idea why red cabbage wouldn't form heads when the green one is?
Typically, green will form heads sooner than a lot of the other cabbages, so that'll be one of the issues. Fertility, maybe we over-fertilized a little bit. That might be the other issue.
Okay. If the tulip foliage is totally yellowed, can they be dug and stored, or should they wait?
They can dig them, store them. If they've died back, go ahead.
All right. Nice job. You ready, Amy?
I'll give it a shot.
We have a Lincoln viewer who says it looks like the powdery mildew is actually killing choke cherries. Is that possible, or is it just ugly?
It's just ugly. Powdery mildew will not survive if it kills its host.
There you go.
Oh.
All right, we have a South Sioux viewer that has dark sunken spots on the stems of their peppers, but the peppers themselves are developing just fine, the fruits.
I maybe lean toward early anthracnose infection, which is a fungal disease very common with the wet weather. Wait and see. If it becomes an issue, you need to harvest those mature peppers later because it can affect the growing peppers when they're immature.
Okay, we have a Ravenna viewer that had a whole branch of a crabapple went from fine to toast in 3 days with no visible wound.
I would lean toward fire blight
And prune it out.
and prune it out.
Okay,
And not 6 inches, we're looking at 8 to 10 inches below the
okay.
infected area.
We have a viewer that has those black spots on their aspen leaves already that we typically see in August. Same thing.
It's just a fungal leaf spot. It's because we're cool and wet.
Okay, awesome, nice job. Okay, cool.
This may come as a surprise to you, but I feel the need for speed.
So, how do we kill broadleaf weeds in a pasture without hurting the grasses?
Depends on the weeds and the pasture grass, but there's a number of options available. Probably graze on or something like that would be a first choice.
All right. Will Roundup for turf kill the brome in the bluegrass, but not the bluegrass?
It depends if we're talking about Roundup for lawns or Roundup weed and grass killer. Roundup for lawns will not, and it won't kill your grass either. Roundup weed and grass killer will, but it will kill everything else too.
Okay. We've already talked about solarizing killing bindweed. Will it kill those seeds?
Probably not.
Okay. Should a person fertilize with their weed control now, 1st of June?
Yes,
Okay.
this is a great time to fertilize.
All right, good. Sod has been sitting in the parking lot in Kearney at a store. How long will those sod rolls be viable?
Typically, we want to lay sod within 24 hours. If we can't, let's wet the edges, and you can probably stretch it for a few days.
Okay, a few days, but
Yeah.
not like.
I wouldn't wait weeks, yeah. But if you wet the edges to keep them from getting too dry,
Okay,
yeah,
all right,
good work.
excellent. Ready?
I have to play off call. I am speed.
Okay, so what is a bait for carpenter ants that is safe for inside and won't kill the birds?
There's a couple things you could use. First of all, carpenter ants aren't really well baited. You can try the Max Force Carpenter Ant Bait Gel. It contains honeydew. That's one option. If they're in the sugar mode, another protein bait that you can use is the Advanced 375A bait.
Awesome. Will 7 control sawflies?
Not real readily unless they're ingesting it.
All right. This particular viewer had billbug damage last year and heard that you can use a preventative.
They're looking at using a imidacloprid type product.
Okay.
And for bill bugs, we're getting awfully close to that time.
All right. We have rose leaves that have been skeletonized. What's up with that?
Rose slug,
And,
permethrin type product up underneath, or hose spraying them off. They can't crawl back up on.
okay. We have a viewer in North Platte that saw this monster beetle that looked like it had huge big old eyes. Any idea?
Probably an eastern-eyed click beetle. They are predatory. They're the good guys.
Fun. Okay. 4-way tie. Well, in other words, I either didn't give you hard enough questions or you're getting really good at this.
I think we're really good.
We are the experts, remember?
You are the experts. All I need to know is who gets the question. I don't do that very well sometimes. All right, so Jeff, we have some beauteous flowers, and of course Gladys always did us really well, and none of these are from her garden, although they probably could have been. One of them lives in her garden. So what do we have?
This is kind of the K-State theme tonight, isn't it? You kind of went with that.
These are all out of the backyard farmer garden.
Okay. Well, the tall plant you gave us here is the penstemon, the prairie dust penstemon, a favorite plant of mine. I really like the penstemons. A lot of different colors and leaf types, and so it's kind of a fun plant. And they'll seed themselves. So does this one go true to seed, or will it come up white?
We have not seen our seed yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
The iris we have here is beautiful. This this is the Fontenelle iris. So you said from an old farmstead. Is that where you originally got it?
Harlan Hammernick.
Oh, Harlan Hammernick.
Harlan,
Oh,
yeah.
fun.
And named it. Yeah.
Okay. So this is a beautiful iris. And then we have down below this Kent Bell campanula. And so these are all going to be sunny plants. So you have a nice warm place. This is the kind of plant you're going to want to. You can celebrate Wildcat football in the fall then with this, right? Is that what
Well,
you're?
they won't be blooming by then,
Yeah,
so we're
right,
golden.
right.
We're good on that one, yeah.
Okay.
And that penstemon actually is one that Dale Lindgren developed.
Oh,
so
great.
2 of the 3 are our own Nebraska people, and the Kent Bell is kind of unusual. And
Yeah, it's very nice.
if you trot to the backyard farmer garden this week, you can see them, and then they're probably going to be gone. So very nice. And again, Gladys always did us proud, and we're trying our best, but I don't know that we're as good at it as she'll.
This is pretty nice, though.
All right.
So, Kim, could I refer to the question I had before break? The hard potatoes. Thank heavens for the Idaho Potato Council. Looked it up, and yes, you can have a center of a potato that remains hard. It's because we went through a cold period when the tubers were still in the ground, and that part of the potato is where the stem was at, and it remained dense and didn't get enough starch in it. So Idaho Potato Council says it occurs occasionally, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's all environmental.
There you go. Thank heavens for potatoes in places that grow them well.
Yes.
All right, your third picture, Wayne. This viewer is actually south of Lincoln. And 12-foot Austrian pine, lots of dead needles. New candles are trying to hang on, but this is what's going on the trunk of that thing.
This looks like classic Zimmerman pine moth.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're at the point of the year where you can't really do anything. You can wait till August when those adults are going to start flying. You can trap or watch for them, and then once you start seeing them, then you can try to protect that tree with an insecticide at that point on the top end, or on the topical application to get the newly hatched larvae. In the spring, in around April, when those larvae are still outside on the bark, you can then get them with a topical insecticide as well. But we're in the middle period right now, so unfortunately there's nothing we can really do. If you want to feel really vindictive, I know I've suggested this before, but you get a nice thin bendable wire and you just feed it up in there and you can try and scramble them.
Yuck. Okay, on that note, we have 2 weeds that kind of looked alike, but thank heavens you discovered they're not. The first is taking over a 1-acre pasture. She wants to know if something called Dr. Earth Pet Safe would get rid of it, and she wants to know what it is. And the second one, which we can talk about in a minute, but what's this one?
Okay, so the first one there is shepherd's purse, and that's a winter annual, and you can tell it. So the first photo, not this one. There we go. If you look really close, kind of towards the bottom left of the picture, you can see a heart-shaped fruit, and that is a capsule that contains seeds, and that is very characteristic of shepherd's purse. So this is a winter annual. You can see the senescing tissue. It's fading anyway. I wouldn't waste herbicide on it right now. Dr. Earth, whatever, is probably some type of desiccant, I would guess, so it probably would burn it down, but to an established plant, it's probably not going to provide good control.
Okay. And the second one is actually a Midtown Omaha viewer. This is in the flower bed.
Okay, and so this looks like it could be 1 of 2 different weeds. I believe it's probably field pennycress because of the size of those fruits. The other option would be Virginia pepperweed, but they are usually a little bit smaller in size. But so those circular oval-shaped fruit tells me that that's field pennycress. And again, that's a winter annual, so I would pull it if it's bugging you, but I wouldn't waste herbicide on it right now. Earlier in spring, any broadleaf herbicide should take care of it.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Cole. Amy, this is a viewer that has a Sundance apple and gets spots on the very young fruit. Very early, the apples get misshapen. He does refer to if it's an insect and talk about 7, but is this yours?
This is definitely mine. This is classic apple scab formation on the fruit itself. The fruit being infected now can actually, as it continues to grow, that fungus can cause the fruit to be misshapen, deformed, and it gets really hard and corky when you go to cut and eat that apple. So how do we prevent it? Just like cedar apple rust, apple scab is going to follow the exact same protocol. You're going to do a fruit fungicide application spray. We're going to start when bud break occurs, and depending on our product, we're going to make 2 to 3 applications. If you're looking at a tree that is susceptible and you really want to produce apples, I really recommend that you follow a disease and insect, a fungicide, insecticide, fruit spray schedule. That way you are for sure protecting that fruit throughout the entire life cycle.
All right, thank you, Amy. All right, Jeff, this is a tree question.
Okay.
Funny looking 3-year-old honey locust, prolific foliage atop a very damaged skinny trunk. So
Right.
here's that skinny trunk. And it must be the sun whatever honey locust from the sounds of things. But she wonders if the tree will ever thrive with this oddball trunk wound in it, and then with a tall drooping leader, do we suggest cutting that off, or what do we do here?
You know, I would say because of the size of the tree, because it's still pretty small, I think this would be an ideal choice for a replacement, a removal and replace. So at this stage, you know, we don't have a lot of time invested in this. And I know you hate to get rid of a tree that you've put in fairly recently, it looks like, but because of the damage, I think you're just better off starting with something new.
Right, especially since honey locusts get all those cankers and things.
Yeah.
All right, good. Well, you know, there are plenty of furry creatures in your backyard that can cause all sorts of havoc. Rabbits, squirrels, voles, all those things. But for our second feature tonight, Dennis shows us some techniques for keeping raccoons out of your yard and garden.
Raccoons can cause a lot of problems. They can get into your garbage cans, they can get into attics, and if you have beehives, they really cause a lot of havoc. In this location, they started just taking the tops off and stealing the sugar water. Then when we strap the tops back on, what they've done now is tossing over these beehives. So we're going to show you how to properly cage trap a raccoon to remove them from the area or the yard. First, you need to pick the right size and right type of trap. We're going to go with the cage trap. These cage traps, you want to pick one that has one opening, not two openings. Now, either size, this size or this size, will catch good-sized raccoons. We've caught a 25-pound plus raccoon in this one last night, and you can catch smaller raccoons in this size cage. So either size will work fine. These are approximately 2 foot deep, 18 inches or 2 foot deep, and they're about 10 inches square or 8 inches square or 8 by 10. Any of those would work with the one opening. The other thing you're going to need, besides a good trap that has openings or cage type about 1 inch to 2 inch openings or less, is a rebar or some kind of stake. Because what you're going to do is you're going to stake these down so the raccoons don't toss them over. So you're going to need a metal stake. Besides the metal stake, to help hold the tarp down on top of the cage, you're going to get a heavy brick or board. And what use for bait? Well, with raccoons, especially these, they're after sweet items. If you use things like tuna fish and sardines, yes, you'll catch a raccoon. They like those things, but you'll also catch all the neighborhood cats. The best thing to go for, that pretty much raccoons like and most other animals don't go readily for it, is good old marshmallows. Get a bag of the nice big marshmallows and use those for bait. So get your cages, your rebar, your brick, and your marshmallows, and you're ready to go. Picking the right location is very important. So what you want to do is pick a location that's out of the way from dogs and children, kind of hidden, maybe under a tree, but you also want to be in close proximity of where the damage is occurring. And again, if you're trapping a vermin, you must do it on your own property. You can't trap on someone else's or public property. You're going to put the cage firmly down in a location where it sits firm. You're going to bait it with the marshmallows hung in the center, because you don't want to put the marshmallows or any of the bait on the bottom of the ground. You want the animal to see the marshmallows in its line of vision. So you're going to hang the bait from the top. Once the bait is in the cage, you're going to stake the cage in place, set the cage, and then cover it with a tarp. Set right before dusk and be there at dawn. Don't wait to 10 o'clock. Be there at 6 or 7 to check and see if you have an animal. If you have an animal, you need to take it up, get that animal to a safe location, whether it's damage control or the Humane Society or animal rehab. Remember, you can't translocate more than 100 yards. You can translocate within 100 yards.
As And as Dennis said, be sure you check those local requirements for animal control to know what to do with any you do trap. And our panel said, you know, he didn't even have to toast those marshmallows. Yeah. You know,
No
just
s'mores.
imagine
It's
if they
bummer.
figure out what s'mores taste like. Campers are never going to be safe again. Okay, number 4 picture. This is a Lincoln viewer. This has cool pictures of hatching insects. And you can see them on the trunk of the tree. It's a honey locust, wondering what creatures will soon be crawling all over the yard.
Oh, this is a great one. And I've had these on the show in the past, where you look at the front end, it's black, and the back end like that, it's red. They have long, lanky legs, like a little spiky. These are wheel bugs.
Oh.
So these are the recently hatched wheel bugs that later in the summer are the great big, large assassin bugs that are predatory. I would not worry about those things at all. They might eat 1 or 2 of themselves, but in the end, we're looking at something that's going to be out there eating a lot of insects for us.
Cool, very fun. All right, cannibalism.
It happens a lot in the insect world.
This, let's see, this viewer, Cole, has a real problem with a weedy grass that was previously identified as either nimblewheel or annual bluegrass. He's treated with tenacity with no success. Used Roundup, reseeded, but it still reappeared.
Okay, so this is not nimblewheel or annual bluegrass. This is rough bluegrass. You may also have heard it called rough stalk bluegrass or poetrive, which is a shortened version of its Latin name, poetrivialis. This is a perennial species. And so, you know, if annual bluegrass is a problem child, this is the bigger, badder brother or sister. That's sneaky, right? We all had a sneaky sibling, or maybe you were the sneaky sibling. You didn't know it was.
Not confessing.
Yeah, we know. You didn't know it was a problem because you didn't know that you had the problem, right? So this is a perennial species that we can't control with pre-emergence herbicides, and it's a tough one. It comes back year from year. It spreads with stolons we saw in some of those pictures, and it gets really grainy, and so you'll see it lay over like that, and that's really characteristic of poetrivialis. The bad option is that the bad thing is that there's really no good selective herbicides. Tenacity won't work to control poetrive in a lawn, or a cool season lawn, I should say. So the first thing you should do is grow dry. Poetrive likes shade and it likes wet feet. So if you're in a shaded location, maybe just let the poetrive be. It looked like it was in full sun. So I would say we can probably get a handle on this. So grow dry. If we irrigate to a wilt stress, like I said earlier in the show, we'll certainly ensure an irrigation deficit for that poetrive, and that'll start thinning it out. The second thing is to raise the mowing height to 3.5 inches. 2 reasons that won't work in this situation. It looks like the mowing height's already around there. And 2, you have a nice big patch, and there's really no competition that's going to occur there. So what we need to do in this situation is probably renovate, and unfortunately glyphosate is the only thing that's going to work. Glyphosate applications work better in spring, but that doesn't time really well for seeding cool season grasses. So if you're feeling ambitious, seed or spray now and seed and try to get something established. What I would probably do is let it go through the summer, and then do a renovation with a couple glyphosate applications first this fall, and then know that it's going to take successive years to really get control of this thing.
All right, thank you, Cole. Amy, this is a viewer that has an os tree dying, and the shrooms are plentiful.
They
I
are
want to
plentiful.
know kind of what are they, as much as anything.
These are beautiful conch mushrooms. They're beautiful to me. Some of them actually might be on the oyster species, and there's some oysters that you can eat, but of course I'm never going to recommend that you do that. What this is indicating is that you have soft rot of your heartwood on the inside. So the inside of that tree is slowly being eaten up by the fungus, and it's popping out these mushrooms out of the side to reproduce. So it can blow in the wind and go into another tree and start a heart rot that has any type of damage. So when I start seeing this many conks on a tree, I start wondering about structural integrity of the tree. It is a great time to contact a local arborist to take a look at your tree. If you don't have any local arborists, there is one quick way you can do it if you have the tools. You're going to take a cordless drill with a long bit, and you're going to run it into the trunk of that tree, because what's going to happen is if it's hollow on the inside, it's going to be solid, 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 just like when you drill into sheetrock and you hit that empty spot, that drill is going to go zip right on through. And that's going to give you a good indication how much wood do I have that's keeping the structure of that tree. If you only drill in a cup, like maybe an inch or two, and all of a sudden you hit that zip, I would be really concerned about integrity. And then you would really want to consider removing the tree so you don't have to worry about it blowing over and possibly landing on something valuable this summer. But otherwise, contact an arborist. They can assess a lot better.
All right, thanks, Amy. This is a Wayne viewer that wants a cool little perennial identified.
Okay.
And part of the identification is there's a weed, Cole, that looks a lot like that. So what do we think this one is, Jeff?
Well, that's a creeping Veronica, so low-growing Veronica. So it could be a couple of things. I know we talked about this before. So, you know, my guess is there's a cultivar whitewater that is common, and it's likely that that's what it is. There's Veronica repens, which is very low-growing as well, but I don't know how common that really is in the yeah. So I'm guessing it's probably whitewater. I know that there was some question how she got it. So you know, and I guess over time it may get taller than it is now as it develops, as the crown develops. It may get a little bit bigger than it is, but it's a good ground cover, just kind of like our winter annual Veronica that I had some in my yard this year, and it was blue and pretty, so I left it alone. So gave something else for the dog to roll in. So
there you go, perfect. Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Well, we have some announcements. The first being the Garden Club of Lincoln Breakfast and Garden Tour this Saturday. Starting place and number on the screen in the Backyard Farmer Garden is one of the stops on that tour. Our second one is Plattsmouth Garden Club Garden Walk, which is Sunday, so come to us, go to them, another number on the screen. And the third one is this June, this very week, we start the Produce from the Heart donation of extra produce, 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. on Tuesdays in the Backyard Farmer Garden. So we're looking forward to that. All right, we have just a little bit of time for a handful of questions. This is a Papillion viewer. Wayne wonders, the roly-polies are eating the plants. Are they beneficial or not?
It's interesting that they're actually feeding on live, actively growing plants. It makes me wonder if there's not something else going on with those plants, that they're stressed or something's oozing out that they're attracted to. Because usually we see them getting into things that are damaged or decaying.
Yeah, all right, so they're beneficial, kind of, sort of.
Usually.
I've had them in some of our perennial gardens take out, or it appeared they were taking out perennials.
Yeah.
So
we've had the same thing, so apparently they've morphed.
Mutants.
Mutant rollies. Okay, West Point, Cole, tall fescue and bluegrass. Is there any way to control it?
Tall fescue in bluegrass. Pull it by hand if the clumps are small enough. Other than that, you can try non-selective with glyphosate. There's not any good options for selective control, unfortunately.
All right. Amy, any diseases of river birch that come to mind short of chlorosis?
Chlorosis, and I have seen a few cankers on river birch, but cankers are really hard to identify in river birch because we're losing the bark on them all the time anyway. So unless you're too wet, it might be a root issue.
Okay, all right. Elkhorn, Jeff, a June-bearing strawberry patch, 15 years old.
wow.
And now they are producing bitty little small berries with a hard skin.
Might be time for renovation. So that might be a good time to go in and move some plants and do some of that, add some compost to that soil, or maybe create a new patch and move things over. So
Yeah, time to start over.
yeah.
Okay, just a bit of time here, Wayne. Bellevue, bitty grasshoppers are being seen. Can they be controlled now?
Pray for really, really hard, intense rain, and that'll take care of them. Now's the time if you want to control grasshoppers. Use any standard lawn product that you can apply topically that might contain carbaryl. Okay. Also on the roly-polies, since I have just enough time to probably fill this out, since they are crustaceans are very susceptible to any of our pyrethroid products, so something like permethrin